Are you really the head of the kwik-e-mart? No, I'm not. I'm sorry, Andrew. I'm the head of SMWS Australia, but I'm not the head of a kwik-e-mart. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends, Matt Bailey here. One of our most popular videos on our YouTube channel was 8 questions I've been asked this year about whiskey. And I've done it again. I've taken these questions I've heard over the year where people have said to me, oh, what's this mean, or what is that, and how does this work? Well, now's the time to do it. So I've taken all the questions that I've heard over the year and I've decided to compile them in a list here. I even put on our socials, as you can see here. If you're not a member of our Facebook group, please get on it. It's a great community to be a part of. However, I put in the Facebook, in our SMWS Facebook group, I asked any additional questions you want answered, and I'll answer them in this video session. So let's get straight into it. We'll keep this nice and tight. Here we go. So I'm going to call it 10 questions that you asked me this year, and I'm going to do my best to answer each one. So here we go. Bam. Okay. First one was, are all the codes different distilleries? Yes and no. We'd like to keep it confusing a little bit here. Most of them are. Most of the codes are different distilleries. Distilleries 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, for instance, and onwards, are all different distilleries. So 1.200 is a code example, is the distillery 1, cask 200. That means that, that distillery is the only code for that distillery. However, there are some examples of where distilleries have had split codes, not because of anything other than different still configurations. So if they're using different stills, then it's technically a different code. It doesn't always work that way, but because there were sort of mistakes made in the early days, as they'll say, and we've learned a lot over the years. But generally speaking, they have different codes. But you'll find things like 112 and 122. Yes, they're technically the same distillery, along with 135, G9, and G15. Those 5 codes are all one distillery, but they come off different stills. So there are some examples like that where they all have different codes. The same with like 23 and 127 is another example of where same distillery, different codes. So yes, it's almost always the case, but not always. But yeah, hope that helps. Question number 2, are the flavour profiles changing? What happened to that? Okay, so that question's come from someone, I'm not going to say who obviously is a little bit on the inside at SMWS, who knows a little bit more about what's going on at the moment. They would have noticed there was a bit of a review of the flavour profiles. Were they going to change the names on them? Were they going to get updated? Were they going to get increased or reduced and those kind of things? It seems like we've just settled for the moment, and the profiles we've got at the moment work really well. So we may as well just stick with what we've got. If it works well, it works well. So I think, and a lot of the feedback was that a lot of our flavour profiles are already so identifiable with the SMWS. As in, members know those flavour profiles and know those names, and so why mess with something that's already good? Old and dignified, sweet, fruity and mellow, and young and sprightly, and those kind of things. And so we're not going to play around with that too much. But your flavour profiles are your best ways of usually having fun with flavour and actually picking whiskies. It's a really members love it, and the flavour profiles have become part of our identity, which I love. Question from Andrew Moat: are you really the head of the kwik-e-mart? No, I'm not. I'm sorry, Andrew. I'm the head of SMWS Australia, but I'm not the head of a kwik-e-mart. Although that sounds like fun, but thank you for that really informative question. Here was your question. What does 2024 look like for SMWS? That's a really broad question. That came in via a direct message just the other day. What does next year look like? I mean, this year is our 40th birthday. Next year, 2024, there's no real milestone for us locally or for SMWS internationally, but it's a big opportunity for us to really grow the club and provide amazing member experiences. And we're working on our next year plans pretty heavily at the moment and have been for a few months, which is really exciting to see what's coming out in the next 12 months coming into next year. It's such an exciting space to be in, and we'll share more with you as it comes along. But our main focus at the moment is, of course, November and December, and just getting through these big months for us at the SMWS and keeping going. Question from Dave Cook via social media: why aren't there more SMWS releases from Distillery 51? You could say that about almost any code, though, Dave, and I appreciate the question, and I know you're. Obviously, this indicates to me you're quite an Irish whiskey fan. We do love Distillery 51. We had a long string of them about 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, where we had a string of 51s coming through, and they were all mostly 16, 18-year-old single casks from Distillery 51. They were great whiskies. I'm kicking myself for not picking up more of them at the time, but that's the way things go. I can't speak to 51, but I can promise you there's more Irish whiskey coming soon. I won't say any more than that, but there is more Irish whiskey coming through soon, which is very exciting. Next question came in last night as well. What are you bringing to Whisky Abbey? That's in a couple of weeks' time. Whisky Abbey is this big festival in Melbourne, held by Casa de Vinos, and they put on this big festival, and it's great to be a part of Whisky Abbey. We love working with Jose and the team. I've got a lineup. I've got a really cool lineup. Let me just say this, and this is my sales pitch. Come see our stand first. Let's put it that way. We're going to have some bangers that you don't want to miss, and I've only got a pinch left in some bottles, which will vanish on the day. So if you're coming to the Saturday session, I'll see you there. If you're coming to Sunday, I'll see you there. They're big sessions, so prepare yourself. Get lots of rest. Drink lots of water. Next question came in via socials from Giorgio Jung. Good to see you, George. George asks, what are you wearing? Right now, I'm wearing a black shirt and no trousers. No, I'm just kidding. I'm wearing trousers. But thanks for asking, George, what I was wearing. I'm wearing a black shirt, trousers and boots. But, I appreciate the question. I told you I'd answer all these questions. Next one came in from someone who asked, I've heard you talk about house style a couple of times. What does this mean? What I mean by that is sometimes I'm referencing society whiskies that are so far removed from a house style that the distillery code doesn't matter. So when you have something like a peated Distillery 1, or a peated Distillery 35, or a bourbon cask from Distillery 24, those kind of things where they're whiskies that are in cask types or of peating levels or of maturation styles or wood types that are never ever used in the house style of that whiskey. So if you have a distillery like Distillery 24, which is predominantly almost always in sherry casks, or Distillery 54, which is almost always in sherry casks, and then you taste something like a bourbon cask expression, or a Amontillado expression, or a Moscatel cask expression, that's so far removed from the house style. We had a 10 dot something recently, a few years ago, I'll say now, that was a juicy oak and vanilla 10 from an ex-Moscatel barrique. Like, you're not going to taste an unpeated Islay whiskey from a Moscatel barrique very often. That's unusual. So it's outside of the house style of that distillery. Every distillery likes to have their own house style, and that's part of that story. Hope that helps. Next question was, are you going to continue doing the virtual tastings next year? Yeah, we are, absolutely. We've been doing them every month, and actually they still sell out every month, which is really encouraging to see. Now, there's two reasons for that. Is because people still like to go, still like to do the virtual tastings and be a part of the community, and we have a lot of members that don't live anywhere near capital cities. So for them, getting to a tasting, if they live 3 hours out of a city that's hosting one, is just not viable. And so, we're talking like a 3-hour drive or something, and then a 2-hour tasting, and a 3-hour drive home, and you can't drive because you've been at the tasting, and it becomes a mess. So it also takes up a huge chunk of your day. So the virtual tastings have been really popular, especially with our more regional members, and in cities where there might be less tastings, like Darwin and whatnot. So there's going to be sort of like, we do host virtual tastings still every month, and we're going to continue doing them because the demand is still there. We were doing a lot more of them during COVID, of course, because it was a pandemic and people were stuck at home and everyone enjoyed drinking whiskey at home. However, even outside of a pandemic, we're still doing them every month because members love them, and we love doing them, and we love hosting them and having special guests on and talking through the whiskies, and it's all part of education, it's all part of learning about whiskey. So yes, in a nutshell, yes. Next question came in about a week ago, which was, how do I learn even more about whiskey? Well, like just general education about whiskey, which is sort of following on from where I was going just then. A lot of what we do at the Society is about education. It's about entertainment, but it's about education. It's about learning more about whiskey. And some of that might come from virtual tastings, might come from videos like this one, might come from other videos on our channel, might come from our blog, might come from, of course, Unfiltered magazine. How many of you are reading Unfiltered every month? You should check it out. There's an amazing amount of great content in there to learn about whiskey and the people and the fabric that makes this community. There are, however, a number of blogs and third-party sites that I also reference regularly. The Malt Whisky Yearbook, which looks like this. I encourage you to get a copy of that. You don't need to get it every year. I'm one of those nerds that likes to get it every year, and there's a lot of people who do. But it is one of those ones that it's just good to brush up on every so often. It's in my bag almost all the time for every tasting because it's good for quick refreshers on distilleries. There's a few sites I always recommend. Of course, Andrew's site, Whisky and Wisdom, is always a good read. He's always doing amazing critiques on the trade. Scotchwhisky.com isn't updated as much as it used to be, but is still active and is still one of the best resources for Scotch whisky distilleries. So there's lots of things out there. I'd say even Serge Valentin's blog, Malt Maniacs, all those kind of things you can check out to learn more about whiskey. I don't like reading a lot of whiskey reviews, I'll be honest myself, but people like that sometimes. But I like learning more in depth and articles about it. Also, check out Dr. Nick Morgan's articles. I don't know his site off the top of my head, but he used to be the historian at Diageo, and he writes some amazing stuff for a few publications in the UK. Dave Broom, of course, Becky Paskin, all these great writers out there in the Scotch whisky trade, I should say, especially. And there's some great writers in American whisky and Australian whisky as well. I think many of you will know the Australian whisky writers, people like Luke McCarthy and whatnot, who write great whisky articles, and Chris Middleton. And so, look, there's so much good to learning out there to be made by great writers of the trade. Next question came through was, what inspires you in whiskey now? That's probably the biggest question of the lot, isn't it? That's like, what inspires me? And you know what? It's that sense of just happiness, joy, flavour, exploration, and never tasting the same thing twice almost. It's just that constant journey of discovery. Like, it's that like unending passion for good single cask whiskey, because it's always changing. Like, I often think about if you were representing a brand as a brand ambassador, if you're representing a brand that has its core range that is almost never ever changes, and you're talking about the same ones on a regular basis, you'd have the slickest polished presentation because it's part of that story the whole time. Whereas our story is about the society and about origins and 40 years and Pip Hills and the vaults and all that, which is great. But I never get to taste the same whiskies that are tasting twice, almost ever. Unless I'm doing, 2 tastings in a row, 2 nights in a row with the same lineup, which is uncommon. But it's also just forging those memories that you have when you open a bottle of something special. When you open something and you go, I'm going to open this with some friends, and you share that around, and you have this amazing experience of these whiskies that you then have these memories of saying, oh, do you remember that 4.332? Do you remember that moment when we opened that and had that at the Christmas table, or whatever it is, which you are going to have less of if you're constantly referring back to recalling memory. I wrote about this recently in an outturn about how time doesn't get faster as you get older. It only gets faster if you're not creating new memories. So it's just the way our brains work. If you're not creating new memories, then you're constantly recalling memory. Therefore, time goes faster because it's repeated. It's the way our brains work, and so that sort of thing is just so exciting to me. You can always create these new memories through exciting new single casks that come out every month. You can say, whether it be a picnic or just at home or a late night dram or some friends around the table, it's just like that's the best time to enjoy whiskey, and that's why I love what I do in whiskey. It's that community of bringing people together and sharing great whiskies that you are truly passionate about. I was a member of the Society well before I joined the team. I was a huge fan of what the Society was doing. I used to go to Andrew's tastings at the RAC on a regular basis. And so, I knew these experiences, and I knew what it was all about, and I got so excited about it. I used to get excited about these Society tastings weeks before they were coming up, and that was just sort of part of that great story. And I've got to say, I love the benefits that the club we're able to offer up to members. That, for me, is the other thing as well, where I say, we're doing this, and we're doing this, and we're doing this, and you can access this, and you can go to the vaults, and you can get a discount on this, or whatever it is. And it's our partner bars, it's unfiltered, it's the members, it's everything together, which makes it an actual whiskey club, not just like a bottle subscription club thing. But I truly believe in what we're doing, so that's what keeps me inspired. That's what keeps me inspired in whiskey right now. I hope that answers a rather broad question, but there you go. I think I cut off about 10 questions for us today. I had 2 bonus questions which came in right about 20 minutes before we started, which were Facebook Messenger messages. One was, what's in November outturn? Look, keep your eyes peeled. We've already done some videos coming up on the malts of the month, but the rest, if you're watching this after it's already come out, then hey, that's the way it goes. And how do I fix my email details on my account? We've got an amazing member services team. Have you spoken to Susie or Janelle lately in our Sydney office? Go speak to them. give the office a call, 02 9974 3046 or info@smws.com.au. Pop them a call or an email, and I'll get back to you. That's 10 questions I've been asked in 2023. I hope that really helps your whiskey journey and you've learned a few things along the way. Sanjava, cheers, see you soon, best wishes, bye for now.